This is going to be my last video on the syllabus and the course requirements. By the way, I should tell you, normally as we go through the course and you have to, and I do put up more videos for you that I've created, they're going to be smaller in duration, maybe 3 to 5 minutes typically what's going to happen, and there's going to be a whole series that'll get you through the material in the course. But let's do this. I just want to go through what we're going to be doing in the course of the semester to give you a rough idea of where we're going. And there's some more stuff in the syllabus you should read. And once you're finished with all of this, I'm going to give you a quiz on this, which I'll be posting shortly. Well, we're in the midst, in fact, we're just about finished with the first week. Introductions, course requirements, the trolley dilemma. We've talked about the trolley dilemma a little bit. It's going to bleed into next week. So we're well along the way. From there, we're going to see, basically looking at the trolley dilemma, that there are really two major theories that people seem to naturally gravitate towards, two philosophical theories of ethics, what makes actions right or wrong. And we're going to see, because we're going to see an alternative in week 2, we'll be talking about an alternative dilemma that's a variation on the trolley problem. And the people who thought that one answer was perfectly appropriate in the original trolley dilemma aren't going to think that that's appropriate when they look at the second trolley dilemma. So what we're going to do in the next week is go through a little bit more of the trolley dilemma and tie that down to moral reasoning and arguments to explain how we go about reasoning in this context. What makes good reasons? What makes good arguments for adopting a position? From there, we're going to then spend the next week really digging down into some details about how you go about evaluating arguments. Some characteristics that philosophers talk about, validity and soundness that make good arguments, how you go about reconstructing arguments and what that has to do with the whole process. This probably is the most practical part of the entire course, because we're going to see that we evaluate reasoning, we evaluate arguments throughout our everyday life, in everything that we do. It is really very important. And this is probably the only course where we're going to really talk about what the standards are of a good argument are and how you go about presenting a rational argument. From there, we're going to go back to the trolley example, and we're going to start digging into or drilling down on one of the particular theories, a theory called utilitarianism. This is a theory that we're going to be reading John Stuart Mill's book, or good part of the book by the same title, Utilitarianism. And we're going to begin trying to figure out exactly what the theory is and what this concept of utility is and how that makes actions right or wrong. And we're going to understand why that's important going back to the trolley dilemma. We're going to then have another week of talking about some clarifications of the theory. There are a lot of people, you might have heard about utilitarianism in other courses, non-philosophy courses, so maybe in political science courses, sociology. You might have heard the word utilitarian in kind of reasoning. We'll be talking about, we're going to be drilling down, but we're going to make really clear what utilitarianism is. And I think in other courses, what they talk about utilitarianism is not exactly what Mill is talking about. Now, once we've clarified utilitarianism, we're then going to go on to see that there are some significant problems in accounting for our ideas of what makes actions right or wrong. And then in the next week, we're going to even talk about some more difficulties with this particular theory, and that's about the middle of the semester, so we can expect that will be about midterm time. On the second half of the semester, we'll be talking about the variation of the trolley example, the fat man variation, and we'll begin to be talking about a theory that was originally devised by Immanuel Kant, sometimes known as deontology. And we're going to begin to understand what that theory is and how that theory changes the way or how it views the actions. In particular, we're going to have to, in the following week, the 8th week, we'll be talking about Kant on what he calls imperatives. Think about imperatives, commands, and in fact his basic moral principle, which is known as the categorical imperative. We're going to talk about a bunch of examples, and in week 9 we'll be moving on to problems for the categorical imperative. Now let me be candid with you. I have, on very rare occasions in teaching this course many times, gotten past week number 9. That is, some of the other material that we're covering just takes up a lot of time. But I'm hoping to get past that now, and in week 10 we'll find that Kant has a second version of the categorical imperative, and we'll talk about it and its problems. If we have some time, we'll talk about applied ethical problems. That is, applying these theories to help trying to figure out what's right or wrong. Some problems you might look at: death penalty, hate speech, freedom of speech. I think those were big topics maybe last year. They still are big topics at this point. Another one I might talk about happens to be something that I've thought about lately is ownership of guns. And finally, week 12, time allowing, we will have a review, and then we will have the final, where you'll hand in the paper, depending on which version of the course you're taking, at that point. And as I warned you, this is subject to change depending on what happens. There are a few other topics that we will be covering so I want you to get a good overview, good introduction to philosophy. Now, next steps. Read the rest of the syllabus. There's some rules about conduct in class and conduct, and what applies in class also implies on our discussion boards. This kind of substitutes for our discussion, our in-class discussions for online versions of the course. So take a look at that stuff. I will be putting up a quiz. You will find a quiz after this about the syllabus. And the reason I give this is just to make sure that you really have read it and understood it, because in class, typically, people come up to me at various portions and they ask me questions, sometimes relating to the grading standards, etc. And honestly, I have to tell them, I really don't know. I'm going to grade you on whatever I said in the syllabus, because that's really the guide. If there are changes, I will let you know as the course goes on. But we're kind of past the introduction. We're going to be turning back now to next week to the trolley example and moving on from there.